Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Grid Live Wrap Up. Kyle Larson wanted the Charlotte Roval as Joey Logano got eliminated from playoff contention. Supercars had his crown jewel race. The Bathurst 1000, the Great Race of Australia plus IMSA, finished up the year with another exciting edition of Motul Petit Le Mans. I'm Kobe Lambert from Grid Tonight, and with me is Ben Snyder from Grid Encore and NASCAR.info. We definitely want to give a big thank you to all of our great Patreon supporters, Colin, Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Link in the video description below if you are interested in investing through Patreon. We also appreciate Buy Me a Coffee and YouTube Super Chats to show your support there as well. Ben had a lot of great racing this weekend, from the Charlotte Roval to Mount Panorama, and then the Motul Petit Le Mans at Michelin Raceway Road, Atlanta. But I believe we're going to start off tonight with the Bank of America ROVAL 400 at Charlotte.
Thank you, Kobe. Welcome, everyone, again to Grid Live Wrap-Up. Happy to be filling in for Joe Samaniego, who's on the road tonight, and we're going to get to Kobe's thoughts on those other two big events, the Bathurst 1000 and Petit Le Mans for Supercars and IMSA, respectively, later on. But in the meantime, we have to start, I think, with the NASCAR Cup Series race at the Charlotte Roval. Congratulations to Kyle Larson. We'll get into the stats and numbers behind his win here in just a moment. But the first thing I want to say, thank goodness we got a clean, straightforward race overall, I think, in many respects, and specifically the finish there. Great to see that we ended in regulation, didn't have any sort of controversy there towards the end in terms of when the caution light came on or what resulted in an overtime finish. And of course, we'll have much more on what happened in the Xfinity race, the heartbreak for Parker Kligerman, but at the same time, a triumph for Sam Mayer in the Xfinity Series race. We'll have that for you on Encore tomorrow. So with that said, Kyle Larson scores his 29th career win in the Cup Series, breaking a tie with Carl Edwards and Rex White for sole possession of 30th on the all-time Cup wins list. Ironic that Carl was also at the track this weekend. You may have seen the tweet that RFK Racing put out with him and Brad Keselowski, his old rival, on stage together, sharing a moment together. So a couple of Roush Racing legends in that respect, getting to reunite this weekend. Good to see Carl at the track. But in the meantime, his place on the wins chart displaced by one as Larson ends up passing him there with his 29th victory. Incredible how quickly Kyle Larson has been able to move his way up that chart. And given where everybody else is on that table in regards to the Hall of Fame, I think we can say Kyle Larson, regardless of what happens with the championship this year, well on his way, as Carl Edwards will be in just a few months, to a Hall of Fame enshrinement ceremony of his own whenever he stops racing in NASCAR full time. Hendrick Motorsports as a whole has a very strong championship fight going left with all four of their cars. They make up half of the round of 8, all four of them. Larson, obviously, with the win today, and then Alex Bowman, Chase Elliott, and William Byron all moving on to the round of 8. So they have an opportunity to do what Joe Gibbs Racing came very close to doing in 2019 when they put 3 of their 4 cars in the championship 4. Kevin Harvick was the only non-Gibbs entry to make the championship 4 in 2019. They have a chance to go one better and lock out the championship 4 and guarantee Hendrick Motorsports a championship. But they do have some stiff competition to get through first. They have to make sure that none of the other 4 championship or round of 8 drivers, that is, win one of the next 3 races and keep them from doing that. So Hendrick Motorsports, nonetheless, a great playoffs for them here. 6 races in. We'll see if they can continue that here in the round of 8. Also well done to 2311, both on the driver and owner side of things. Their owner, Denny Hamlin, persevered to advance despite a shaky start to the postseason for him, and what's going on off track right now with 2311 in front row of a lawsuit involving those 2 teams and NASCAR and the charter agreement. We'll keep our eye on that as that continues to develop. But in the meantime, right now, it's not stopping Denny Hamlin from moving on, nor is it his driver, Tyler Reddick, who had to overcome a lot of adversity, involved in an incident earlier in the race, had some minor damage that he needed to repair, and then had to drive his way back through the field, and did so to the point where he advanced in the playoffs. But his team, the 45 team, did not. Joey Logano was eliminated. His even year championship streak of making the championship 4 will not continue. But the number 22 teams may very well, because the 22 is in the owners round of 8. There's a bit of a discrepancy there between the drivers and the owners. This goes back to Kyle Larson, who, of course, won today and is making another serious run of championship. Of course, he ended up skipping the, ironically enough, Charlotte Oval race, the Coca-Cola 600, because of the weather-impacted Indianapolis 500 that he was running on the same day. So Larson sacrificed some points that Justin Allgaier picked up in his car. Those points were the difference between the 5 team winning the Owners' Championship in the regular season, that is, but Kyle Larson just barely losing out on the Drivers' regular season championship to Tyler Reddick. So those extra playoff points made the difference in terms of what is happening with the 45 team and Tyler Reddick now. Reddick just to the good on the driver's side, not the case on the owner's side. 22 still has the edge there. So we could have an interesting situation again where we have this split championship battle. If the 22 team can go out and maximize the next few race weekends here, maybe get a win here, could maybe spoil the Hendrick party, could spoil the championship party for whoever it is on the driver's side of things. It's something that we see, that we have seen rather in Xfinity and trucks for many, many years with, part-time teams or not part-time teams rather, but part-time drivers sharing one full-time team's ride, splitting the owner's championship with whoever wins it on the driver's side. But we don't see that nearly as often in the Cup Series. But due to the circumstances, what happened with Indianapolis and Charlotte and Kyle Larson's double attempt this year, we may very well see that on the Cup side once again. So something that's worth keeping an eye on because, of course, all the prestige is with the Drivers' Championship, but the Owners' Championship is where the finances really come into effect for a lot of these teams. A lot like Formula One with the drivers and constructors. Mercedes won the Constructors' Championship in 2021, and I guess financially that benefited them, but nobody in the team was celebrating at Abu Dhabi in 2021, of course, because of the heartbreaking way they've lost the Drivers' Championship with Lewis Hamilton to Max Verstappen. So an interesting split situation there. We'll keep our eye on that as the season continues to go on here as well. In the meantime, Logano eliminated from the driver's side, like I mentioned, along with Austin Cindric, Daniel Suarez, and Chase Briscoe. So no Hail Mary Cinderella story for Stewart-Haas Racing before they close their doors at the end of the 2024 season here. Now, the top 5 drivers, all playoff finishers. We'll take you through the top 10 results here. Kyle Larson, obviously your winner. Christopher Bell, second. He's moving on as well. He's got a good shot to get back to the championship 4 once again. Larson's Hendrick teammate William Byron finishes 3rd. Austin Cindric 4th. Chase Elliott 5th. Then you have the Kaulig Racing teammate J.J. Allmendinger in the 16 car finishing in 6th, and Shane Van Gisbergen, the pole sitter, a late entry to this race in that number 13 open car, the 3rd entry for Kaulig Racing. He ends up 7th. So didn't quite have the same magic that he had at the Chicago Street Course last year, or even at Watkins Glen earlier this year, where he just missed out on that win to Chris Buescher. He ends up in P7, Joey Logano P8. Again, enough for the owners, not for the drivers to move on. Bubba Wallace, a very strong run for him in 9th. Video of Michael Jordan congratulating him after the race, saying you're becoming quite the road racer. That was, of course, something that Bubba Wallace struggled with when he first got to the Cup Series, adapting to these road courses, but a strong top 10 run for him today. And then your defending champion, Ryan Blaney, finishes in 10th. And then just outside of the top 10, Tyler Reddick, again, a very spirited drive to get back enough points to move on and keep his championship hopes alive as well. So, again, when it comes to Kaulig Racing, I know they had high hopes going into this race. Of course, A.J. Allmendinger has won at least one race pretty much every year that this event has been a thing here with this Charlotte Roval. You have to go all the way back to the inaugural race in 2018. He did not win that Cup Series race when he was still with JTG Doherty. Then he took 4 in a row from 2019 to 2022 on the Xfinity side of things. Then, of course, won the Cup race last year, so comes into this race this season as the defending winner of the Cup race. But I don't know if it was just a new layout or if they just didn't have the speed this year or whatever the case may be. But strong results nonetheless in both the Xfinity and Cup race for A.J. Allmendinger this weekend. But the first time since 2018 that he has come to the Charlotte Roval and not visited victory lane in at least one of the 2 races that weekend. So a little bit disappointing for him, I suppose, but still a strong run for that car nonetheless. And Shane Van Gisbergen, of course, driving an open car. He was here for the sole purpose of winning the race. Unfortunately for him, just didn't quite have the pace necessary to get back up through the field there at the end, but still a 7th place result. Very strong run, and I think, again, kind of indicative of what I think we're going to see next year. Would not put a strong playoff run on the Cup side of things past SVG either, given how strong he's been on the road courses this quickly in his entry into the NASCAR Cup Series. Now, some final points and logistics I want to give some thoughts on before we move on here. There was an early penalty for Bubba Wallace, so again, a good job on his part to overcome that and still come away with the top 10. But NBC showed this graphic of why he was penalized for shortcutting the course. The final chicane before the start-finish line. The track was modified from the Xfinity Series race yesterday because of some of the incidents regarding the turtles. So Those were taken out, smoothed out a little bit. And what that led to was a couple of drivers cutting that final chicane. Bubba Wallace did that. And in the same exact frame that NBC was showing on the broadcast, it appeared that William Byron did the exact same thing. Granted, I think Byron was a little bit closer to being within the track limits still. But Bubba Wallace ended up getting penalized for that. William Byron did not. So that certainly raises some questions in regards to race control and their consistency when it comes to calling these things. Certainly not as controversial, I think, as what happened yesterday. So it was good that, again, we got a clean finish to the race in that regard. But at the same time, I think something that race control should certainly take a look at before we come back to this race next year. And on that note, I'm just going to speak here as a fan real quick. I don't expect this to happen. I think that NASCAR is very happy with the schedule that they have for next year and the plans that they have for the next couple of seasons. But I've got to tell you guys, I think the novelty of the Roval for me has not only started to wear off a little bit, it kind of wore off a long time ago. I was very excited when this race was first introduced in 2018 because I think we had some great races at Sonoma and Watkins Glen. Fans were begging for more road course races, and NASCAR was kind of in this box where they still had contracts in with the existing tracks and races that they were going to. The best they could do at the time was take one of their mile and a half, because again, I think the mile and a half were a little bit oversaturated. They took a mile and a half date of the Charlotte Motor Speedway, converted it to the best thing, the closest thing to a road course that they could with this Roval layout. And again, I think in 2018, it was a big hit. 2019, 2020, other years, we've had some controversial finishes there. Not that we didn't in 2018 with Johnson and Truex as well, but I think people in many respects have gotten a little bit tired of the chaos and controversy. So again, happy that we got a straightforward finish today at the very least. But I don't know. I just think with the next gen car being so good on the intermediates, it's really the opposite problem that we had in the Gen 6 era, where we weren't getting very good racing on the intermediates, but when it was more in the driver's hands on the short tracks and the road courses, those races tended to be quite a bit more exciting and entertaining. Now we kind of have the opposite problem. The car doesn't race very well on short tracks, doesn't race as well on road courses. Maybe it's a little bit better than it was when the car was first introduced in 2022. But at the same time, I think the racing on intermediates is so good right now that I would not be opposed, and especially now that we have more natural road courses and even a street circuit on the schedule, would not be opposed to dropping this Roval race and going to a second oval race at Charlotte. And I say that as somebody who, if you watch the show, you maybe have heard me share this opinion before. I think the Cup Series schedule is a little bit too long as it is. I would like to see it down to somewhere between 28 to 32 races, and also 28 to 32 unique tracks. I think if you had to make an exception, you could say the summer race in Daytona, the Firecracker 400, as it were, has just as much history in many respects as the Daytona 500 or his other crown jewels of the sport. So maybe Daytona could get away with having 2 dates, and maybe Charlotte could get away with having 2 dates, being that it is the backyard for many of these, almost all of these Cup Series teams based in North Carolina. But again, even as somebody that holds true to that philosophy, at this point, given the style of racing that we're seeing with next gen car here, I think it might be time to consider closing the book on the Roval, so to speak, leaving that in the past and going back to the oval layout for the fall race here. If we're going to keep the playoff system, again, obviously I'm not a huge fan of that either, but I do like that there is a road course in the playoffs to diversify that schedule a little bit. So I'm sure, we could work something out and get another road course in there as well to make up for that, like we had with Watkins Glen this year, for example. But at the same time, I think that, with how well this car is racing on the intermediates, might be worth considering for 2026 and into the future to maybe go back to an oval date here for the Charlotte Roval. But nonetheless, I think a solid race today. Lots of highlights to point out here. And again, above all, just want to reiterate what I started the segment with. Thank goodness we got a clean finish to this race. Straightforward with Kyle Larson taking the win here. So congratulations to him again. And that sets us up for the round of 8. So we will continue to monitor how the playoffs continue to develop here on Grid Live Wrap-Up. And we'll leave the NASCAR segment there and move on to a similar series. The old home of Shane Van Gisbergen, the Repco Supercars Series, they had their crown jewel race, the great race in Supercars, the Bathurst 1000, and it provided a couple of unexpected storylines throughout the week. In the build-up to the race especially, we saw a lot of drivers running into issues in practice in qualifying throughout the week with mistakes and crashes all throughout the field here. And we thought this might be a sign of a chaotic race. And Joe predicted ahead of time that we'd see multiple cautions, but the race only saw one full course caution behind the safety car, and that arrived on lap 132 when Matt Payne got into the wall and came to a stop. From pole position with number 1 Erebus Motorsports Chevrolet of Brodie Kostecki and Todd Hazelwood was in control of the race. At one point, they had a 15-second lead, massive advantage over Triple Eight's number 88 Chevrolet. But right before the caution came out, Brock Feeney was charging hard and cut Kostecki's lead down to under 5 seconds. Now, although the caution brought them nose to tail on the track, Feeney wasn't able to get by Kostecki, who ended up winning his first Bathurst 1000 and co-driver Hazelwood's first career Supercars win in the quickest Bathurst 1000 in history at 5 hours, 58 minutes, and 3 seconds. So we'll bring Kobe back in here for this first question here in the Supercars segment. Kobe, given the drama brewing behind the scenes of the start of the year between Brodie Kostecki and Erebus, we didn't even know if he was going to be racing much this year in Supercars. How shocking was it to see him end up on the top of the mountain at the Bathurst 1000 this weekend?
Very shocking, Ben. I'll tell you, when we were going through our pick winner and all of that, I don't think I saw a single person pick Brodie Kostecki and Todd Hazelwood. I think everybody was going safe, one of the Triple Eight guys, with the 87 and 88 led by Will Brown and Brock Feeney, along with their co-driver Scott Pye and Jamie Wincup. So we thought it was going to be another Triple Eight show, but it was actually the Erebus show. I know we'll get into Erebus' domination in just a little bit, but to see what Brodie Kostecki and Todd Hazelwood were able to do in this race, it was just magnificent. It doesn't get more dominant than what we saw in this year's edition of the great race. And for Brodie Kostecki, looking at him, like you were saying, and if you've been watching our programs, dating all the way back to the preseason phase, and then you saw him grit tonight. Every other week it was a Brodie Kostecki story. Yeah, and we were really talking about this. It seemed like week after week, Brodie Kostecki was one of our top 3 stories on Grit Tonight, because there was a development here and a development there, and we didn't even know if Brodie was even going to be racing this year. We thought that he was basically going to get paid to stay home until next season, but we still don't really know what happened between Brodie and Erebus on the legal side of things. But apparently they worked out a deal, and he was able to return, after missing the first handful of races of the year. And then when he got back in the car, it seemed very awkward. Like both sides didn't really want to be a part of this. That they were basically just fulfilling this lame duck year until they could part ways at the end of the 2024 season. But as the season's gone on, Brodie's got more comfortable in the car when he first come back. It really seemed like he was really struggling with the car. We know the team struggled a lot at the beginning of the year, but they've continued to work at it, continued to get better. And all of that hard work that they've put together throughout the year, led to this victory in the Bathurst 1000. Yeah, and I think it's safe to say that Brodie Kostecki is finally getting back on form, because it seemed like this year he's been kind of lost out there on the track, trying to get back up to what we saw last year in his championship winning season. And I've actually been kind of surprised that we haven't seen Brodie Kostecki in contention more often this year, because we know what he's capable of as a driver, and we just haven't seen that throughout the 2024 season. And for him to go out there and have the type of performance he did in the Bathurst 1000, it shows, Brodie's back. And for the rest of the competition, for the remaining 2 race weekends we have, and 4 races on the streets of the Gold Coast and Adelaide, I think we could see Brodie in contention, to get at least one more win before the year is out. But it's definitely quite a story, Ben, for Brodie Kostecki, going from not even knowing if you're going to be on the racetrack at all this year in any type of racing category, to later returning in this lame duck season, and then ending this lame duck season in victory lane at the ultimate crown jewel race in the Repco Supercars Championship. Definitely quite a special story for both Erebus and Kostecki. I think you're muted, Ben.
Sorry, I knew I was going to do that when I muted myself here. Had to get a sip of my Baja Blast while I was recovering from ad-libbing the NASCAR segment here. But again, just speaking of NASCAR, again, somebody that kind of flirting with moving to NASCAR like SVG has, with Brodie Kostecki getting a start in the RCR car. I think it's a great story, like you said, Kobe. For somebody who's involved in so much off-season turmoil, to be back here and winning the Sports Ultimate Prize, or the Series Ultimate Prize, I guess I should say, in the Bathurst 1000. Well done, and congratulations to him and the entire Erebus team. Now let's talk about Erebus a little bit more as well, with all the drama happening behind the scenes, sponsors disappearing, and not knowing if we'd see the defending Supercars champion Kostecki on the grid this year. It seemed like Erebus had lost a step from where they were last season to this season. Last year, Kostecki and then teammate Will Brown really took the fight to AAA and best of the gold standard organization in the team's championship. So to see them struggle this year after last year's dominance has been one of the biggest surprises so far of the season in the Supercars world. Erebus obviously hasn't performed up to the same standard as they did in 2023, but to their credit, they've improved throughout this 2024 season. And in this year's Bathurst 1000, Kostecki and Hazelwood completely dominated, leading all but 4 laps, 157 of the 161, en route to taking the Peter Brock Trophy at Mount Panorama. Now, the other Erebus car, the number 9 Chevrolet of Jack LeBrock and Jaden Ojeda, finished 8th after running as high as P4 throughout the race. To go along with Erebus's strong day at the mountain, we didn't really see a lot of action in passing as the field got spread out during the race. Broadcasters did their best to fill some time with very little happening on track. So again, relatively straightforward event there down under. Kobe, is it safe to say that Erebus is finally back? And what did you think of this year's on-track product at the Bathurst 1000?
Before I answer your question, I'm going to catch up on the comments here from Adam Lemeries, who said that the Bathurst 1000 was incredible. Great to see Brodie, Kostecki, and Todd Hazelwood get the win after what happened to start the season. And yeah, Adam, to add more onto this point, with all the, ugly stuff we saw happen at the beginning of the year between Kostecki and Erebus, stuff like this, you don't usually see teams come back together after this. You usually, see teams fall apart completely. And at the beginning of the season, when Brodie came back, later on after the season started, after Todd Hazelwood, was a substitute driver, I honestly thought this team was going to fall apart. And they looked like they were a team that had fallen apart, throughout the season. And then, they just slowly got better and better. And like I said, all of that ended up with a Bathurst 1000 victory, which makes this even more impressive. But this team stuck together. Yeah, it may be awkward still, but they made it work, and more power to them for doing that. And Adam also added, and we did see bump draft in the Bathurst 1000. Yeah, I know Supercars' social media account was saying that was a NASCAR-like move. I believe it was a bump draft. Will Brown and Cam Waters. That was definitely quite a move there to make the overtake on one of the long straights there at Mount Panorama. But getting back to the question you asked, Ben, I absolutely think Erebus is back, and I think that this is something that they can build on heading into the 2025 season. And they can potentially return back to their 2023 form, which we saw them taking the fight to AAA week in and week out. And this year, Erebus, they haven't even been up there near AAA most of the season. And any of the other teams, they just really struggled to find consistency with Todd Hazelwood when he was a substitute driver. Then when Kostecki got his ride back, he really struggled. And then has been a struggle for Jack LeBrock as well. But as the season gone on, I really saw this team's continued to plug away, and they've definitely found something. And as we remember, they used to be sponsored by Coca-Cola, and they had all these different sponsors on the team. And then as the legal situation played out, you basically saw all those sponsors walk away, and then Erebus showing up to the track, in this black car, and then it's still very evident on the fire suits you saw this weekend from Brodie, Kostecki, and Todd Hazelwood. They just had a black fire suit, plain black fire suit that said Erebus Motorsport on it, and flashing back to last year, with the colorful fire suits that they had, it's just still the fire suit is just very symbolic of what this season's been like for Erebus. And it seemed like they were a team lost, out to lunch, and no way forward, and wondering if they were ever going to get back to this level. But they stuck with the program and ended up reaching the highest honor that you can get in the Repco Supercars Championship, and that's been the King of the Mountain of the year and getting that Peter Brock Trophy, who was also nicknamed the King of the Mountain, a lot of other names as well. Yeah, but definitely got to tip your hat to Erebus for the great work that they've been able to do throughout the season, and looking forward to seeing how they end the season at the Gold Coast and Adelaide. And if they can run the final 2 race weekends of the year like they did at Bathurst, that'll be good heading into next year, and they can get back to competing for race wins and championships on a more regular basis. Going to have Jack LeBrock coming back to the team next year, and then they got the newcomer from the Dunlap Super 2 Series, Cooper Murray, who was very impressive in the Triple Eight wildcard entry. He was co-driving with Craig Lowndes. Unfortunately, Cooper Murray got that penalty, that's ended up setting him back a few positions. But it's really nice to see the young gun run up inside the top 10 in the Bathurst 1000. I think Erebus Motorsport have a very good driver to replace Brodie Kostecki. I'm looking forward to seeing what Murray can do in 2025 when he moves into that full-time role. And getting on to the on-track product, Ben, yeah, I don't really know what more we can say about this, but I definitely think the Gen 3 Supercar needs a lot of work. And yeah, because is really, really difficult to pass into their credit. I think the series has been working. Last year, I thought it was a lot worse. I think this year has definitely been a step forward, but I still think some things potentially need to be done. I'm not an engineer, so I'm not even going to go into a list of suggestions of what they can or can't do to this car. But like any other racing series, I really believe that they need to continue to work on this car and whatever flaws there are with it to try to do the best thing that they can, where we can see more exciting on-track action. Because I think a lot of people, were left disappointed that we didn't really see anything happening at all in this race. And like you mentioned, Ben, our own Joe Samaniego said he thought that this race was gonna, be caution filled based on all of the crazy stuff we saw leading up to the race, and not just in the Repco Supercars Championship, in the support series as well. We saw a lot of crashes throughout the weekend, and we thought it was gonna happen on the race. So I guess they got it all out of their system ahead of time, and that's why we had a relatively clean event. And moving forward, I'm sure the Supercars technical team is going to look at this car and see what they can do heading into 2025 and trying to improve the on-track product. Ben, since you're on the air now, I'd like to hear what you have to say about this. I guess one way they can try to improve the on-track product is bringing this Supercars final system that we just talked about last Wednesday night on Grid Tonight, which is the Supercars version of the playoffs. So Ben, if you wanted to give your thoughts on the Supercars playoffs format that they've come up with, and we still don't really know how the bonus point situation is going to work. I think that's their version of the playoff points and all of that. So just really interested to hear what you have to say about this playoff system coming to Supercars. And we know the Bathurst 1000 is the great race of Australia. And next year is not just going to be the Bathurst 1000. It's also going to be a cutoff race, the regular season finale before we go into the playoffs, last 3 races of the year at the Gold Coast, Sandown, and then ending with the grand final on the streets of Adelaide.
Kobe, well, I told you when I came into the stream after you guys wrapped up Grid Tonight, it took every ounce of restraint that I had not to crash the stream and start getting into it with Jackson, especially when I saw his Padres hat when he brought up the Major League Baseball comparison. And of course, my Phillies ended up blowing the division series to the Mets, and condolences to Jackson as well, and his Padres losing the Dodgers. But it's just like it reminds me of what's happened in Major League Baseball, what has happened in NASCAR, and what I fear is going to happen here in Supercars, where regular season performance is just going to matter less and less, and it's going to be about getting hot at the right time when it comes to winning a championship. And I suppose there's an argument to be made that you have to do that. You have to be able to perform when it matters most. But I just feel like motorsports is simply too chaotic and, kind of an apples and oranges sort of comparison when you try to compare it to stick and ball team sports, where you only have 2 teams playing on the same field or court or rink or whatever at once. We saw it. We've seen it in NASCAR, all the time, where AJ Allmendinger today, when he was battling Joey Logano, trying to pass him for position. AJ's not in the playoffs. AJ's not even full time this year. He will be next year. We'll see how that season goes for him. But it's a situation where you have somebody completely unrelated to the playoff situation impacting a playoff driver in Joey Logano and what his chances of moving on are going to be. And also just an interesting stat that one of my friends just passed along to me. When it comes to Joey Logano, he was taken out on the final lap of the Richmond race. That would have been 5 playoff points if Austin Dillon hadn't spun him out there in the last corner. He ends up missing the round of 8 by 4 points. So again, just proof, I guess, that you could say every point matters, every moment of the regular season matters, but it still leaves the door open for drivers who have such a dominant season. Like, perhaps you could say Kyle Larson had, is probably the most recent example of somebody winning double-digit races in a single year with 10 wins. Fortunately, Larson made Phoenix one of those races and went on to win the championship anyway, but it leaves the door open where you could have, like the year before, Kevin Harvick winning 9 races and not even making the championship 4 because he had a situation in the round of 8 where he just couldn't get over the hump here. So again, I suppose I should refrain full judgment until we actually see it in action. Supercars, again, admittedly is not a series that I follow as closely as I do the top 3 divisions in NASCAR over here in the States. But just the idea of introducing a playoff system in a sport as chaotic as motorsports and in an individual sport, not in the sense that there aren't teams that support these drivers and mechanics that build these cars and everything. I'm talking about the drivers' championship being an individual championship where we look at these drivers as individuals, not as these teams and franchises like we do in stick and ball sports. And you have everybody competing on the same playing field one weekend. I don't know. It's just it gives me a lot of hesitation, and I think it's given the fans a lot of hesitation to the idea of embracing a system like this. I think you only need to look at the reaction from a lot of Supercars fans when this system was announced and introduced this weekend. Fans haven't been a fan of what they've seen over in NASCAR, and they're not a fan of it coming over to their series in the world of Supercars. So again, well, I'll leave it there, Kobe. I'll leave it for you and Matt and Josh to discuss on Grid tonight, since you guys cover that series a little bit more regularly than I do. But just I have to say, from kind of an outsider's perspective, as somebody that's not a fan of playoff system in any form of motorsports, much less one as chaotic as NASCAR, and given all the comparisons that get made between Supercars and NASCAR all the time, people say it's kind of Australia's version of what we do in stock car racing world. I don't know, just not a fan on principle of the idea of bringing a system that says right in the press release that it takes inspiration from what NASCAR has done with their playoff system, even though it's not going to be exactly the same. Still not a fan of it. Still would prefer a straight up full season championship battle. Whoever has the most points at the end of the year, they're the champions. What a radical, novel concept, right? If you have the most points at the end of the year, you should be considered the champion of the season because you were the best all throughout the season. That's my opinion. So we'll leave the playoff situation there. And again, I'm sure we'll revisit it when the time comes. But in the meantime, let's get back to Erebus. Let's get back to the Bathurst 1000. And let's look here at at Hazelwood, rather. His performance in the race. He did exactly what he needed to do as a co-driver and excelled at his role after being full-time in Supercars since 2018. He lost his ride at Blanchard Racing at the end of last year. So he stepped back to an endurance role this year with Erebus. However, he started off this season as the main driver in Kostecki's car while that whole legal situation played out behind the scenes. Hazelwood did as well as he could given the circumstances at the beginning of the 2024 season and showed up big time in the Bathurst 1000. We saw what happened to Lee Holdsworth when he lost his full-time ride after the 2020 season. He signed on to do Bathurst with Chaz Mostert, and they ended up winning the grid race in 2021. His performance helped Holdsworth return to the grid full-time with Penrite Racing in 2022, one final time, and he got to go out on his own terms as a full-time driver. Now, at the post-race press conference, Hazelwood said he's working on his racing program for 2025, and he is excited about it. So, Kobe, do you see Hazelwood taking a similar path as the one Holdsworth took and earning his way back to a full-time ride in Supercars? Kobe looks like might be muted there.
Yeah, you did it, so I guess I had to do it
there
too.
You go.
We're
even, right?
Yeah, we're even here. But yeah, I watched the post-race press conference on the Bathurst 1000. I usually jet out before those because, at our time, Supercars races usually very early in the morning, need to get some sleep to be ready for the full day on Sunday. So I actually stayed up and watched this press conference, and especially wanted to hear from Todd Hazelwood. And based on what he was saying, that it's ultimately, up to him and what he wants. And Todd Hazelwood has found joy this year, in running less races, but, being an equipment that can actually go out there and get race victories. I think Todd Hazelwood has proved that he's a really good Supercars driver. He just needed to be in the right opportunity in the right car, and it really seems like he's done something special here with Erebus Motorsport and Brodie Kostecki, and to get in and for your very first Supercars win to be, at the great race of them all. You could really see the emotion on his face. That's what it means to win in motorsports, because winning these races, as easy as Erebus made it look out there, basically leading all but 4 laps of this race, as you mentioned, Ben, it's not that easy at all, despite how they dominated this race. So for Todd Hazelwood, has been a regular in the Supercars for a handful of seasons now, loses ride, not wondering what the future holds, and now you're a Bathurst 1000 champion. That's definitely something that he's going to remember for the rest of his life, because now he's no longer going to be just introduced as Todd Hazelwood, the Supercars driver. He's going to be known as Todd Hazelwood, the Bathurst 1000 champion. And we don't really know what his racing program is going to look like yet for 2025, but it seems like it's something that could be weeks or maybe a few months that's going to be announced. He seems, like you say, he seems very excited about it. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does in 2025, whether he gets one of the few seats that are open for next year, or he continues on as a role as a co-driver. And when Hazelwood was asked at the press conference, about potentially returning to full-time Supercars racing one day, he basically paused for a moment and he went on about how, before in Supercars, he was basically in rides, that were not capable of winning races and competing for championships. At best, you could finish mid-pack in the cars that he was in. And there was like, on any given race day, there wasn't a realistic chance that he was going to go out there and, be one of the main contenders to win a race. And he basically said, if I'm going down to the 2 enduros every year and I only have 2 Supercars races to go out there and, compete for the win in those 2 races out of the whole calendar year, he said he would take that, and like race full time in one of the other categories in Australia, and then take your 2 chances, to go out and win a Supercars race. He said he would rather do that, twice a year. I'm in a competitive car, I can go out there and win as long as I have a strong team and co-driver, versus driving for a mid-pack or back-mark or Supercars team, where I'm frustrated 12 to 13 races out of the year, race weekends out of the year. So I guess that's some food for thought there from Todd Hazelwood.
All right, well, the Bathurst 1000 is in the rearview mirror, so the focus now shifts towards the championship with doubleheaders at the Gold Coast and Adelaide coming up. Will Brown leaves Mount Panorama with a 204-point lead over AAA teammate Brock Feeney. Brown and co-driver Scott Pye took the final spot on the podium at Bathurst behind Feeney and Jamie Whincup. With 4 races and 2 race weekends remaining, it seems like Brown and Feeney will be the favorites fighting for a championship, but don't count out Chaz Mosser. He could sneak his way back into this fight. Only 225 points back, still mathematically eligible for a championship. So, Kobe, when it comes to Will Brown, do you see him keeping the consistency down the stretch here, and is he your championship favorite?
Well, I definitely think the championship is going to come down to both AAA drivers, Will Brown and Brock Feeney. They've definitely been the class of the field this year compared to others, but it's also been nice to see some great parity as well throughout the field. We've seen other drivers get victories like Chaz Mostert, Cam Waters as well. And I remember when Nick Percat snuck in there and got a victory, which was a massive surprise, especially given the struggles he's had in recent years. So from a parity standpoint, I think it's been great. But Will Brown, I think the consistency, is going to be his best friend down the stretch, as we saw last year. During the first half of the season, him and Brodie Kostecki were going head to head, for the championship battle. And then it seemed like once the second half of the season started, Will Brown completely fell apart. And that consistency that we're seeing this year, we didn't see that last year. I mean, we saw it during the first half of last year, but during the second half, just had a whole bunch of things go wrong. And if he can avoid the collapse that we saw from him last year and continue to, do what he's been doing, winning races and getting these strong, consistent points finishes, I think he can potentially have one hand on the championship once we finish the races on the Gold Coast.
All right, we'll leave it there. Still a couple of race weekends to go over in Supercars, so still a championship to be decided. We'll keep our eye on that as the season wraps up here in just a few weeks. So in the meantime, we had another big race going on this weekend, a big endurance race on the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship side of things. Their season is now in the books after another thrilling finale at Michelin Raceway Road, Atlanta. Now, in the closing minutes of the race, the number 01 Chip Ganassi Racing Cadillac battled the number 6 Porsche from Porsche Penske Motorsport for the overall win. And heading into turn 1, it was Ringer van der Zande making a bold move on Nick Tandy, which ultimately ended up being the race-winning pass in Ganassi's final sports car race for now. Van der Zande, Sebastian Bourdais, and Scott Dixon ended the day as winners at Motul Petit Le Mans. However, the win wasn't straightforward. The team battled plenty of adversity to get there. Number 01 Cadillac lost a couple laps early in the race after serving drive-through penalties in the pits and got back onto the lead lap with just a few hours to go. And then with only a few minutes to go while leading, Van der Zande's headlights went out and he worked real hard behind the wheel to get at least one of them turned back on so that wouldn't cause an issue. There was a chance that race control would have penalized number 01 because obviously at that time of night, it's a safety concern to be driving without headlights in the darkness, especially for drivers that the 01 would have been coming up to lap here. They couldn't see that car coming just as much as the driver couldn't see up what was up ahead of him on the road there. So a very precarious situation there for number 01, but Van der Zande brought the car home in one piece and ended up taking the win. So Kobe, how impressive was this for Ganassi of the team's final race with Cadillac?
Yeah, I thought it was a very impressive drive from Chip Ganassi Racing in the final race with Cadillac. And next year, basically like Meyer Shank Racing did this year in IMSA, we're going to see Chip Ganassi Racing taking a sabbatical, and they're just going to be on the sidelines. And as they've already confirmed to Racer.com, we're going to see Chip Ganassi Racing go into the Indy Next Series next year, which is going to be very exciting, to keep all the people on the payroll and all of that. Yeah. And then in 2026, fully expect them to be back with some sort of manufacturer. Don't know what that's going to be. There's been some rumors about them potentially, returning to GTP in 2026 with a brand new manufacturer coming in. But sports cars, they're going to be on the sidelines next year, which is super unfortunate because Chip Ganassi Racing is one of the best in the business, and they truly know how to make a car go fast, as we saw in this race. It was definitely an unlikely victory for them because, like you were saying, they ran into some issues early in the race, and I really didn't think they were going to be in contention. Got back on the elite lap, and then Ringer van der Zande, we knew, since he's going to be looking for a job next year, he hasn't announced his 2025 plans. He was going to go all out. It was basically going to be like a checkers or wreckers situation. We've seen Ringer been on both sides of that. He took the checkers like he did yesterday, or he's been on the side, where he's shunning the car off into the tire barrier because that's just who he is. He either goes all in or he doesn't. And this time when he went all in, it completely worked out. Thought his co-drivers, Sebastian Bourdais, Scott Dixon, those two don't need any introduction. We already know what they're capable of. They did their jobs, and Ringer did his at the end. Ended up getting the job done. So definitely a great way for Chip Ganassi Racing to go out, with Cadillac on top with a victory in the Motul Petit Le Mans, one of the crown jewel races on the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship schedule. And thankfully, they got the headlights working at the very end, on the last lap. When the headlights went out, I was thinking, oh my goodness, what is race control gonna do? But since it was so close to the end, I honestly thought that race control wasn't going to do anything about it, since it is a crown jewel race, and since the race was about to be over in a couple of laps anyway. I know the rules are the rules, but I thought even if the lights didn't come back on, I thought they were probably going to just let it slide, given that this was for the race win. I was thinking if it was a car, maybe multiple laps down, might have called them in, but thankfully, we didn't have to find out, and they were able to, work with Ringo on the radio, tell him which buttons to press, and get this prototype's headlights back on. Because once he took the checker flag, it seemed like the lights were working pretty well because he was definitely flashing them a lot in celebration, and it was a well-deserved victory for the whole Ganassi team.
Yeah, and I guess more proof that it's not over until it's over, especially with these long endurance races. It's always fascinating to see how frequently something like this happens in the final hours, let alone minutes of the race, where we could get a situation where a driver or team that you think is set home free to go on and win at hour 9, minute 58 of a 10-hour race or something like that. We see something like this happen. Unfortunately for Ganassi, the lights came back on and they drove to victory. Now, the GTP championship battle came down to both prototypes from Porsche Penske Motorsport. The penalty after Indianapolis really put the number 6 Porsche in a tougher position to fight their teammates in the number 7 Porsche. And the number 6 finished second overall, one position ahead of the number 7, but it wasn't enough to prevent Felipe Nasser and Dane Cameron from winning the GTP title. They also claimed the Michelin Endurance Cup as well. And while Porsche enjoyed all the glory, one team looking to end a challenging year on a positive note was Wayne Taylor Racing with Andretti. It seemed like the number 10 Acura was in the hunt to potentially win the race until it all went wrong with Ricky Taylor behind the wheel. Towards the end of the race, the number 55 Proton Competition Ford Mustang got turned around in the middle of the track. And then Taylor hit him head on, with both cars suffering heavy damage. This ended the number 10 Acura's race, as Taylor was very emotional in his post-race interview because he really wanted to win the team's final race with Acura. A very unfortunate situation there, taking them out of contention. Kobe, what are your thoughts on Porsche Penske Motorsport's championship winning season? And was there more Ricky Taylor could have done in that situation, or was it just an unfortunate deal that was kind of unavoidable?
As I first and foremost, I want to say I think the rest of the GTP manufacturers are going to be working extremely hard over the short off season that IMSA does get, to try to close the gap, because Porsche, Penske Motorsport, they were in a completely different world this year. I thought they definitely had a leg up over their manufacturer rivals there. Yeah, I thought both the number 6 and the number 7 did an excellent job throughout the season. They were able to win a handful of races and be more consistent than the other teams, and to get the job done. I think they took a huge step forward with that Porsche prototype program this year, and definitely a wonderful championship season for Felipe Nasser and Dan Cameron. Well-deserved championship effort, and it's going to be interesting to see how the other manufacturers are going to respond next year, because if you've been following IMSA silly season, there's going to be some major shakeups in the GTP field. because you have Meyer Shank Racing coming back. They're going to be taking over this Acura program from Wayne Taylor Racing. With Andretti, Chip Ganassi Racing is going to be gone. Action Express Racing is going to look different next year as well because Pippo Durrani is departing the team. Yeah, so we're going to see a brand new driver lineup at Action Express. We also don't know what Jack Aiken's plans are for next year either. So expect to see a lot of change at the front of the field in the prototype category in 2025. And in regarding to Ricky Taylor, it was honestly really sad, see him all emotional like that, because we know how badly Ricky Taylor wants to perform. He's been with Acura, for a long time now. He's been with Acura, since the DPI era when they were Acura Team Penske, and all of that, and then switched over he went back to his dad's team, and then Andretti and all of that. So it makes sense why Ricky Taylor was so emotional. He's been with Acura a handful of years, and he just really wanted to, to end this partnership on the right note. So it was unfortunate that wasn't able to happen. I know it would have been nice if the caution would have come out a little bit sooner. I think that could have potentially helped the situation, but given, the time of the race is pitch black outside, for goodness sake, there was really nothing Ricky Taylor could have done. And when you're going that fast, like that at night, especially during that section of the track, you're honestly just a passenger. And I don't think there's anything Ricky Taylor could have done in that situation, which makes it, just even more unfortunate. And you also have to look at the fact, that Wayne Taylor Racing has horrendous luck at this racetrack. I know they've been able to, see the good sides of the Petit Le Mans, but this time around, just wasn't the case. It always seems like they come down to this race, they have a chance to either win the race or the championship, then just something goes wrong, which ends up, taking them out of contention. And unfortunately, it was just one of those years where something just didn't go right. And it'll be interesting to see how the Wayne Taylor Racing Group does in 2025, because they're going to be going back to Cadillac. And as you remember, during the DPI era, they were a Cadillac team and then switched to Acura, now going back to Cadillac. And if you looked at the if you looked at the 2025 IMSA entry list that they just released this weekend, interestingly enough, it just says Cadillac Wayne Taylor Racing. I don't see the Andretti name, so I guess there's a lot of questions out there that need to be answered regarding to that.
Certainly a lot going on behind the scenes with Andretti's involvement in motorsports as well, with Michael announcing that he's stepping back from day-to-day operations of Andretti Global. So maybe that's going to affect their partnership over here on the IMSA side of things as well. We'll have to wait and see. But we'll leave GTP there, and we'll move on to GTD Pro and the number 19 Iron Lynx Lamborghini. They're the ones who took the class victory with Jordan Pepper, Frank Pereira, and Mirko Bortolotti there. However, all eyes were on the GTD Championship battle between AO Racing's Lauren Heinrich and the Heart of Racing's Ross Gunn. The number 77 Rexy Porsche ran into electrical gremlins, stalled on track, and lost multiple laps, putting their championship at risk. All Gunn had to do was finish in second place ahead of Rizzi Competizione's Daniel Serra. And Gunn put pressure on Serra, but just couldn't get his Aston Martin past the Ferrari. And this meant that despite a day of adversity and a season of multiple co-drivers, Heinrich was able to hold on for the GTD Pro title. Meanwhile, the number 1 Paul Miller Racing BMW of Brian Sellers, Madison Snow, and Neil Verhagen won the Michelin Endurance Cup in the team's first season in GTD Pro. This comes after the team announced they'll enter 2 BMWs in the category next year as longtime driver Seller departs the team. Kobe, how would you describe the year for AO Racing and Paul Miller Racing in the GTD Pro class?
I said, well, gonna start off with AO Racing. It's definitely been quite a year for that organization. In just a few years that this team has existed, I think it's been truly impressive what this organization has been able to do. And we just started off, it's just a brand new team, PJ Hyatt's, starting this team, and bringing on Gunnar Jeanette, who's been a long-time sports car driver, into the frame, to help lead this program. I think they have a lot of good people with that team, and just very early on in this team's existence, now they're a championship-winning organization, and plus they're fan favorites as well, because they really, because a lot of people are very in love with the Rexy paint scheme, well, livery and sports car. That's what they like to call it, liveries, not paint schemes. And then they also brought in Roxy as well. And it's just become a fan favorite. And for Lauren Heinrich himself, young driver coming to America, learning all these tracks for the very first time, that's definitely a challenge within itself. And then to make it even harder for Lauren Heinrich, he's had multiple co-drivers, this season, because earlier in the year, his co-driver Seth Prio has he was called from back to Multimatic, to go back to the factory there and continue to work on their programs for the future. And we're still waiting to hear what Sep Prio is going to be doing heading into the future. But I wonder how Sep Prio feels right now, because if he had stayed on, with AO Racing, he would be an IMSA GTD Pro Champion with Lauren Heinrich. So I'm sure he's happy for his former co-driver Heinrich and getting this done. But also at the same time, I'm sure he's like, man, if I stayed on, I would be a champion right now. So I'm sure there's some elation, and then it's also some disappointment as well. And it's certainly been really good to see what that organization has had to do. And then Paul Miller Racing, I'm not really surprised to see how well they've done in the GTD Pro category as well. Their first season after running in the GTD category. Yeah, so I thought Brian Sellers, Madison Snow, they've been together for, almost a decade now in IMSA competition. They've been doing some really great things together, winning championships, and, winning a handful of races. They've definitely been one of the most successful driver pairings that we've seen in IMSA in recent memory. And as we've talked about in Grit tonight, Brian Sellers departing that team. He's gonna be leading a new team that's going to be coming into the GTD ranks next year with a Corvette. So it's going to be interesting to see how that program is going to come along. But certainly next year, Paul Miller Racing is not going to look the same without seeing Sellers and Snow, working together on the grid. And next year is also going to be a big year for Paul Miller Racing in the GTD Pro category, because they're going to be expanding from a 1-car to a 2-car operation. So we're going to see 2 BMWs, as you mentioned, Ben, and it's going to be exciting to see how this team is going to do in the post Brian Sellers era, because if Madison Snow continues, with this organization, he's going to have a brand new co-driver. And before we conclude our IMSA section, I see we have some major breaking news from the Charlotte Roval. Ben, it's my understanding that Joey Logano is going to continue his even year streak after all.
Yeah, Kobe, I hate to interrupt the IMSA segment here. I'm trying to get a graphic pulled up. Got a tweet from Bob Pockras from the news just coming in. The even year streak, I suppose, still alive for Joey Logano. Playoff update, Alex Bowman has been disqualified for failing post-race weight. Car was too light. That will put Joey Logano in the playoffs, and Bowman has been eliminated. Any appeals will be heard this week, and that's important to note as well. We went through this last year, I believe, with Ryan Blaney getting disqualified from a race and then being reinstated later on. So I suppose we won't know for sure for the next 72 hours or so, or whenever the appeal comes out, Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever the case may be. But as of right now, everything that I said about Hendrick having a shot to lock out the championship throw all that out the window, forget about it. Alex Bowman losing enough points here will be credited, of course, with a last place finish for the disqualification. I don't know if Brock Beard is still on the air with his stream right now, but throw the first part of whatever article he was writing out. I think Corey LaJoy was the last place finisher today, if I recall correctly. So Bowman will now be credited with that. And unfortunately for him, he loses enough points that he is now out of the playoff picture. Joey Logano is back in. So again, just kind of reacting to this live on the air here, as if the season couldn't get any crazier here with this playoff picture and postseason picture. Joey Logano not only still alive on the owner's side as well, now still alive in the Drivers' Championship. I don't know how this affects or impacts the Owners' Championship. I assume maybe the 45 would still be in that regard as well. But I don't know. This is major breaking news here. Obviously, negatively impacts Alex Bowman and Hendrick Motorsports. Heartbreaker for them, but it saves Joey Logano's season and the even year streak potentially still alive for him to get back to the championship 4. He does have to get through the round of 8 first, though, so we'll keep our eye on that over the next few races here. I apologize as well. It's telling me my internet is potentially a little bit unstable here. I've got a few tabs open here, so trying to keep up with the breaking news here. Major breaking news from Charlotte. If you're just joining our stream, Alex Bowman has been disqualified from the Roval race today for failing post-race inspection. The car did not meet the minimum weight requirements. So Joey Logano back in the playoffs, as you see on our ticker down there. Breaking news, the 48 team out of the 2024 postseason on the NASCAR Cup Series side of things. So again, we'll leave it there for now. If any further developments come out while we're on the air, we'll make sure to bring those to you. But in the meantime, we'll bring it back to our IMSA conversation here. We've got one more class to go over, and that's the GTD class. And we saw a fierce battle for the class win between the number 34 Conquest Racing Ferrari and the number 78 Forda Racing Lamborghini, Conquest Racing ended up taking the checkered flag with Albert Costa Balboa, Manny Franco, and Cedric Cibarazzuoli. While the number 57 Windward Racing Mercedes won the Michelin Endurance Cup in a strong year for Philip Ellis, Russell Ward, and Indy Donch, which also saw Ellis and Ward take home the season-long title. The number 11 TDS Racing prototype won the LMP2 class and also claimed the Michelin Endurance Cup with Stephen Thomas, Mikkel Jensen, and Hunter McElrea. However, this year's LMP2 championship was awarded to the number 52 Inter Europol by PR1 Mathason Motorsports, Tom Dillman, and Nick Bull. Next year, each team will be fielding separate entries in LMP2 with Inter Europol competition running its own program and PR1 Matheson Motorsports doing its own thing. In 2025, IMSA returns on January 25th, of course, for the Rolex 24 Daytona, with plenty of changes expected to take place throughout the paddock. Be sure to check out Grid Tonight Wednesday evenings at 5:30 p.m. throughout the offseason for the latest IMSA silly season news. My apologies if I mispronounced any names there. I'm still kind of in shock from the news that we just got from the Charlotte Roval. As you can see, breaking news on the bottom of our screen here, Alex Bowman out of the playoffs with a disqualification today. Joey Logano is on to the round of 8 after all. So with that, we'll leave everybody to react to that breaking news here and react to what stood out to us the most from this weekend in the world of motorsports. Kobe, take it away with our one shining moment as we get ready to close out tonight's show.
Yes, time for a great one shining moment from this racing weekend. So whether it was from the Charlotte Roval, the Bathurst 1000, or Motul Petit Le Mans, let us know down in the comment section below. What's the one thing that stood out to you the most from this racing weekend? And Ben, I'll let you go first.
Well, again, forgive me for taking an easy one here, the easy way out, I guess you could say. I was going to make it about Hendrick Motorsports as a whole, locking out all four, or I shouldn't say locking out yet, having the opportunity to lock out the championship 4 because all 4 of the cars made it to the round of 8. Obviously, I can't say that anymore. So I had my one shining moment ruined with this disqualification news as well. But I will still give the one shining moment to Kyle Larson. Job well done. Thoroughly deserving victory, leading 62 of 109 laps, getting the job done for his number 5 HendrickCars.com Chevrolet team. Well on his way potentially to another championship run. And as was mentioned on the broadcast by Lee Diffie, when Larson won this race in 2021, he went on to win the championship that year. Maybe this is a good omen for him picking up championship number 2 in 2024. So Kyle Larson, Hendrick Motorsports, that's my one shining moment, though it's not as much of a one shining moment as it was 10 minutes ago because of the news regarding Alex Bowman.
Yeah, and my one shining moment is also going to come from the Charlotte Roval. I got to give it to Tyler Reddick and the performance that he put in. We know Tyler Reddick won the first stage of the race and looked like he was going to do everything that he needed to do to advance to the next round. And then we saw, back in the pack, he got into, as Calvin Fish from NBC Sports like to say, he got involved in a little argy-bargy there, and saw the back end of the car go up in the air, had some damage. He had to pit multiple times to get the toe link fixed. And, in situations like that, that's definitely not a spot that you want to be in. But, as many times as he came down pit road and the team continued to work on the car, I know the car wasn't as good as it was, earlier in the day without the damage, obviously. So for that number 45 team to come in clutch here, and Reddick behind the wheel as well, picking them off left and right, and then other drivers struggling as well. It just really showed that, this 45 team was meant for this moment in the playoffs, and they did exactly what they needed to do to advance. So not just a clutch performance from Reddick behind the wheel, it was a clutch performance from that entire 45 team as a whole. So that's why they're my one shining moment from this racing weekend. And if you're just joining us and see what's scrolling at the bottom of the screen, we have some breaking news from NASCAR. Alex Bowman got disqualified from the Charlotte Roval because his number 48 Chevrolet failed to meet minimum. They failed to meet the minimum weight requirement. So they were put at the very back of the field, scoring points from 38th place finish, and because of that, they're eliminated from postseason contention, as Ben is kindly put there on the screen. Bob Pockers. Yeah, so that means Joey Logano, even your streak is going to continue, and Bowman's playoff hopes are over for now. And we'll see what the week brings in the next few days ahead, because it's not over yet. Until it's over, we'll have to wait and see what happens later on. So got quite a shocker from the Charlotte Roval. I'm sure I'm sure we'll continue to digest this, in the hours ahead and into tomorrow as well. I'm sure you guys might touch on it again tomorrow, Ben, on the Encore show, among other things as well. Yeah, and also I also want to remind all of our viewers out there to be sure to check out our social media pages late tonight or sometime during the day tomorrow for week 28 of the Grid Ranking and with this disqualification. I'm sure that's going to, change some of our NASCAR grid ratings as well. So that's going to take some additional time for our own Joe Samniego to figure out. And looking at our schedule ahead during the week, on Monday night, Ben and Brandon Crossland going to be back for the Grid Encore show, recapping the Xfinity race, and I guess tonight's breaking news as well. Give Brandon a chance to chime in on that. And then Wednesday, we'll be back for Grid Tonight. Looking forward to seeing this week's headlines, and then probably going to have a new episode of Women in Motorsports later in the week. And then we do it all over again next weekend on Saturday with Grid Live pre-race. And if you like what you saw tonight, consider becoming one of our Patreon investors, just like Colin, Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Link is in the video description below to invest through Patreon, and you can also use Buy Me a Coffee and YouTube Super Chats to show your support for the Grid Network as well. For Ben Snyder from Grid Encore and LastCar.info, I'm Kobe Lambert from Grid Tonight. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a wonderful night.